Africa, more specifically the Sahel region where Burkina Faso is located, would not experience what the Western nations were afraid of. The president of Burkina Faso has revealed his intentions for the future, which are truly on a whole other level. He is a genius, and his ideas are so potent that they have the potential to bring Africa together. All African nations against terrorism will never require international assistance or troops thanks to his initiatives. Instead, the Western nations will become completely irrelevant in the region as the African nations unite and support one another. African nations may utilize, protect, and prevent further exploitation of their natural riches in this way. All of Europe's grand intentions for Africa were shattered when his interview was broadcast live in the West. He put the last nail in the coffin by stating unequivocally that he will not prioritize holding an election in Burkina Faso until he has resolved the security issue. How will he accomplish that? Let's watch this video to find out. No one anticipated that Captain Ibrahim Traore, a youthful leader, would have plans to transform Africa when he took office as president of Burkina Faso in October 2022. Indeed, his mission was not limited to Burkina Faso. He intended to completely transform Africa and establish it as a global powerhouse. He kept his ideas to himself because it would have been understated at the time to reveal them. But now that he has been in charge for a year and has gathered all of his forces, he has finally expressed his thoughts. He stated in an interview that you usually don't stay inside the table itself when trying to defend the edges. Instead, you go above and beyond it. If Africa had supported Niger or Mali since 2012, would it have become the site of terrorism? I doubted it, he said. African nations, he claimed, stayed inactive because they believed it only had an impact on others. This pattern is also seen in a number of nearby states. They make the error of not anticipating comparable events. He made a straightforward point. Foreign aid and military would never have been required if African nations had supported one another. The argument emphasizes the necessity of addressing security risks with proactive and preventive measures, particularly with regard to counter-terrorism initiatives in the Sahel region. The comparison to protecting a table's perimeter emphasizes how crucial it is to provide assistance outside of one's immediate borders in order to stop security threats from spreading. That's a brilliant plan, really. It asserts that African governments must act outside their borders rather than battling terrorists within their own nation. This implies that they must work together and begin a more extensive counter-terrorism campaign. The analogy to safeguarding a table's perimeter emphasizes how crucial it is to develop defensive plans that are proactive rather than reactive. It highlights how important it is to take proactive measures to address security issues before they worsen and spread to nearby places. It appears that the development of terrorism and instability could have been avoided by taking proactive steps, such as providing assistance and support to neighboring nations who are at risk. This argument also claims that the rise in terrorism in countries like Mali and Niger has been a result of inadequate support for these countries. It highlights the value of ongoing assistance and coordination with surrounding nations, underscoring the part that regional cooperation plays in halting the spread of security risks. It is suggested that the development of terrorism in the area might have been prevented by a coordinated effort by the bordering states. Given that all of the Sahel nations are battling terrorism, Ibrahim Traore emphasized the importance of collective security. He acknowledged the shortcomings in the strategy for dealing with security issues, showing that some nations have not completely recognized the possible dangers in their immediate area. But by admitting these mistakes, a more proactive and all-encompassing security strategy that transcends national borders can be developed. He added that adopting a proactive posture is the most efficient method of self-defense. This supports the claim made by some Western countries that they should intervene in the Sahel to stop terrorism before it reaches their borders. It also has to do with safeguarding the nearby community. There is no excuse for being inactive. In light of the consequences from Libya, which flooded the region with weapons and ultimately fueled the emergence of terrorism. He claimed that if the other African nations permit Niger to fall victim to destabilization, it will create a precedent for other nearby nations. "We can't let the tragedy in Niger happen again," he said. "Africa must therefore take a rational approach to this." When African nations participate in this endeavor, their main goal is to protect each of the nations in the region, not just Niger. All African nations must so offer their support. He cautioned that Burkina will suffer if Niger devolves into chaos. It is working together closely. Air units coordinated flawlessly just last week to destroy a group that the Nigerians had seen returning to the Burkina Faso region. He claimed that Burkina Faso's military seamlessly coordinated their intervention. This is the strategy that Burkina Faso is supporting. Ibrahim Traore encapsulated the whole issue of terrorism in African nations. He stated unequivocally that rather than depending on foreign soldiers and assistance, African nations need to take charge of their own destiny. The reason for this is that if nations are divided and each has its own objectives, terrorism will never be defeated. A country will unavoidably be impacted by terrorism in its neighbor. As a result, African nations must cooperate since it is essential to their existence. In fact, he has already begun to work on the strategy he has in mind. There could be a number of important ramifications and possible consequences if African nations choose to work together in the fight against terrorism, rather than depending entirely on outside forces and assistance. Cooperation among Sahel countries, for instance, might lead to better security protocols and coordinated counter-terrorism efforts. The area can strengthen its ability to successfully handle security challenges by exchanging intelligence and carrying out cooperative military operations. Additionally, more cooperation is probably going to help keep the Sahel region stable overall. Cooperation among neighbors can lessen the impact of terrorism across international borders and lessen interstate conflicts by promoting mutual trust and understanding. Local security personnel would be empowered and able to take a more active part in tackling security issues if counter-terrorism were approached collectively. Increasing national defense and security forces' capabilities could encourage independence and self-governance in addressing security-related matters. A country's sovereignty and autonomy are frequently threatened by an over-reliance on foreign money and military, as has already happened in the Sahel. Therefore, Sahel nations may demonstrate their independence and take charge of their security issues through regional cooperation, promoting a sense of self-determination and self-governance. Pan-African unity and solidarity will be fostered by a concerted effort to combat terrorism in the Sahel. Sahelian nations might serve as a model for greater cohesion and collaboration throughout the continent by showcasing a dedication to tackling internal issues as a group. Furthermore, cooperation would make it easier to combine resources and knowledge, which would result in a more effective use of monetary, military, and intelligence assets. Countries should enhance their capabilities and the effectiveness of their counter-terrorism policies by minimizing duplication of effort and resources. These cooperative initiatives may then result in the creation of all-encompassing, locally relevant solutions that are adapted to the particular difficulties and dynamics of the Sahel. Countries can strive for sustained peace and prosperity by tackling the underlying causes of terrorism and extremism, such as socioeconomic inequality and problems with governance. African nations will be less dependent on outside aid, making the area less susceptible to outside interests and pressures. This might encourage a more independent and sustainable security strategy, enabling Sahel nations to put their own interests and development goals first. However, why does Ibrahim Traore permit such a high level of security stress? That's because the fundamental thing that has prevented African nations from progressing is security. It's the perpetual challenge that has hindered African countries from focusing on growth and advancement. Furthermore, other sectors of the economy suffer because the military receives the lion's share of the budget. It's all because of terrorism. But he indicated something that no one had previously considered. He emphasized that only African nations that were formerly French colonies had an elevated prevalence of terrorism. In other words, Britain, Portugal, Germany, Italy, and Belgium all had colonies in Africa. However, only nations that were under French rule have seen terrorism. The reason for this is because, despite their independence, France is the only nation to have remained in its colonies. It sought to take advantage of them and their assets. But since they were on their own, they had to come up with some justifications. Consequently, it sparked terrorism in these territories, necessitating the deployment of foreign forces. Mali, among others, has publicly stated that France arms and finances terrorism. This now demonstrates that the main issue is terrorism, and France wants it to remain in the Sahel. What actions does this motivate African nations to take? As Ibrahim Traore has stated, the answer is straightforward. African nations must get together to combat terrorism as a group. It must halt the country's ongoing cycle of dependency and internal strife, whether or not it is financed by France. He made it plain and gave everyone his word that unless this security issue was fixed, he would not call elections. For this reason, he announced that Burkina Faso would delay elections until security issues were addressed. Traore had previously promised that by the end of 2024, democratic elections will be held. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. According to him, the election will not be limited to Ouagadougou, Bougariba, and a few more nearby towns. Every Burkinabe must be allowed to select their own president. For the sake of Burkina's citizens, candidates should be allowed to campaign wherever in the country. The bottom line is that Traore came to power after the coup in 2022 amid Islamist bloodshed, including attacks carried out by Islamic State and Al-Qaeda. Traore made an effort to enlist people for the Fatherland Forces civilian defense while he was in government. Traore recently confirmed that they were at war, so things haven't gotten much better. Traore, who had before promised to return to democracy, also disclosed plans to change the constitution to make sure it represented the will of the people. Once he had taken control, at first, Traore had given himself 2 to 3 months to make Burkina Faso more secure. Yet, the country is still dealing with Islamist assaults a year later. When 34-year-old Traore took the oath of office as interim president, he became the youngest leader in history and vowed to retake land and ease the transition to elections in July 2024. On state television, Traore stated his intention to amend the country's constitution in part, pointing out that the current version represents the opinions of a select few educated people at the expense of the general populace. Ibrahim Traore is aware that the main issue is security. Foreign meddling in Africa will always be a possibility unless it is resolved and terrorism is eradicated. That is not what he wants. He wants to stop the West from using any justifications to invade Africa and take advantage of its resources. African nations cannot tolerate a situation similar to the Libyan civil war, which broke out after a brilliant leader like Muammar Gaddafi was assassinated due to outside intervention, as he himself stated. Hillary Clinton received an intelligence brief from her old friend Sidney Blumenthal about 2 weeks after France launched airstrikes on Libya in March 2011. The memo alleged that President Nicolas Sarkozy was driven by less than honorable reasons, such as a stake in Libyan oil and worries that Gaddafi might use his substantial gold reserves to challenge France's hegemony in the region, in order to overthrow Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The amount of Blumenthal's engagement is evident from the emails that were made public from Clinton's office. He was responsible for about 1/3 of all the emails that Clinton received regarding Libya. Blumenthal, who is associated with the Clinton Foundation, supplied regular updates to Clinton, despite not having an official job at the State Department. These reports frequently included nameless sources who were allegedly close to Libya's political elite. These briefings were prepared with assistance from Blumenthal's partner, former CIA agent Tyler Drumheller. Through their company Osprey, both men were looking for commercial prospects in post-war Libya. Blumenthal sent Clinton emails that contained unusual claims, such as Libyan elites seeking better relations with Israel and accusations of European spy agencies supporting the creation of a semi-autonomous tribal zone in eastern Libya, despite their lack of real success in these endeavors. One of the memo's more interesting intelligence reports focused on Gaddafi's purported scheme to support a new African currency with a significant quantity of gold and silver. According to the sources, France stepped in to stop this action because it was worried about how it would affect the French-backed CFA franc in West Africa. According to the letter, Sarkozy's decision to participate in the strike on Libya was influenced by this particular development. Blumenthal did not work for the State Department when he sent the gold conspiracy, but it is evident that Hillary Clinton took his opinions seriously and occasionally encouraged her staff to take the material into account. Blumenthal's intelligence, for example, stated on August 27, 2012, that a new Libyan president would look to establish a covered relationship with Israel. With a message recommending that it be shared with the Israelis, Clinton sent the email to Jacob Sullivan, her top policy aide. Clinton's advisors expressed suspicion about some of the intelligence assessments, saying that not all of the material was reliable. The Blumenthal letter ascribes less than favorable motivations to the French president's decision to intervene in Libya. However, it is unclear what Clinton's team thought of it. As demonstrations turned into a civil conflict in the spring of 2011, Nicolas Sarkozy spearheaded the call for a European airstrike against Gaddafi. In order to meet with the National Transition Council, which the Blumenthal memo referred to as France's client. Later, Sarkozy urged other NATO nations to launch military operations after recognizing the NTC as the legitimate government of Libya. Clinton visited Sarkozy in France just 2 weeks prior to Blumenthal sending the Gaddafi gold memo, during which the president pressed her to back an air assault in Libya. Sarkozy at the time openly defended his backing for military action by claiming that it was necessary to stop a murderous rampage and to aid Libyans who were trying to free themselves from slavery. The Blumenthal memo, on the other hand, offers an alternative account. Blumenthal's sources told Clinton that Sarkozy's decision was driven mainly by 4 issues, aside from worries over a new African currency supported by Libya. These included Libyan oil, increased French power in North Africa, giving the French military a worldwide platform, and Sarkozy's aim to improve his reputation at home. With a record low popularity rating of about 70% disapproval, Sarkozy faced re-election the following year in the spring of 2011. Sarkozy's decision to step in was perceived by some as a last-ditch effort to increase his popularity. According to surveys conducted in February 2011, 66% of French citizens favored France's involvement in Libya. It just so happens that Sarkozy and the tyrant of Libya had a tense relationship. Shortly after Sarkozy was elected president in 2007, Gaddafi traveled to France to negotiate a contentious $200 million arms deal. In order to appease the Libyan dictator, Sarkozy gave him a private tour of the Louvre with his female bodyguards and permitted him to hunt in the Rambouillet forest, which was historically used by French kings as a hunting site. During his visit, Gaddafi even set up a heated Bedouin tent in the Hotel de Marigny's gardens, which are used for state guests. When claims surfaced that Gaddafi had provided financial help for Sarkozy's 2007 election campaign, the relationship between the two men took an odd turn. A 2006 memo detailing Gaddafi's plans to provide €50 million to support Sarkozy's campaign was released by a French investigative news site in 2012. A document that Sarkozy contested. The paper was verified by former regime insiders and came from the archives of the overthrown Gaddafi regime. However, the Blumenthal intelligence does show that Sarkozy's arguments for the wall were not taken seriously even in American intelligence circles. Significant circumstantial evidence also connects France's oil interests with its desire to see Gaddafi overthrown. Libya's National Transitional Council promised in a letter released by the French daily Libération in 2011 to give France 35% of the nation's crude oil in return for France's full and ongoing support. Another Blumenthal document that had already been made public supported this letter, which told Clinton that early in the rebellion, French intelligence services talked with NTC leaders to ensure French control over Libya's oil industry after Gaddafi. Clinton was warned in the March 22, 2011 letter, meaning money talks in French, that the French intelligence agency DGSE had started a series of covert meetings with key Libyan opposition leaders in order to provide them with funding and advice. Under Sarkozy's direction, these French agents pledged to accept the council as Libya's new government once it was established. After the Battle of Sirte on October 20, 2011, Muammar Gaddafi passed away. The former Libyan leader was located west of Sirte after his convoys were struck by NATO bombs during the 2011 NATO military operation in Libya. Considering that the entire operation was motivated by money and power, the argument that this intervention was made to liberate the Libyan people from their dictator is degrading. After being taken prisoner by the National Transitional Council forces, Gaddafi was quickly assassinated. When loyalist forces tried to rescue Gaddafi, the NTC first claimed that he had died from wounds he had received in a fighting. However, a video showing his final moments revealed rebel fighters approaching him, with one of them reportedly deploying a bayonet before Gaddafi was shot many times. Gaddafi's murder was criticized since it was thought to be against international law. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International called for an impartial autopsy and an inquiry into Gaddafi's death's circumstances. Following news that Gaddafi had died, Fox News published a piece titled "US Drone Involved in Final Gaddafi Strike as Obama Heralds Regime's End," which revealed that a US Predator drone had been involved in the bombing on Gaddafi's convoy shortly before he died. Given that Libyan rebels had repeatedly stated that they were unwilling to accept overt foreign military support in overthrowing American government leaders under Gaddafi, covered military assistance, it was used to provide the opposition with weapons. Given the great symbolic significance of these activities, the immediate goal after Gaddafi's murder was to quickly begin the supply of humanitarian aid to eastern Libya and then to western Libya. All of this history is known to Captain Ibrahim Traore now. He is aware that he must never provide the West with a justification for meddling in Africa. Western policies will not accomplish this, but by creating a NATO-style military alliance with African nations. In addition to helping African nations eradicate terrorism, this military partnership will protect their territorial integrity and external security. This is how he hopes to transform the fate of Africa. Will Ibrahim Traore be able to bring all African nations together to form a military alliance? Indeed, this has already been accomplished by a security agreement between Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger against foreign assaults. Tell us if you think Ibrahim Traore is the man that Africa sorely needs. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.